Okay, and then I'm going to put on our recording.
And I think it's asking me to press OK. Is that right? The meeting's been, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. So we're going live right now. I can see it on my other screen. We are live. So I'm going to just mute out on it. It actually looks frozen on that screen. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Paul Krismer, I am so excited to be working with you today. I'm Becky Norwood with Spotlight Publishing House. This is the amazing Paul Krismer. And you see that book on the shelf behind him, the one with the little smiley face? That was the first book that I worked with. Had the privilege of working with Paul. The book, he's the best-selling author of Whole Person Happiness, How to Be Well in Body, Mind, and Spirit. What a joy to be working with you on this amazing book, and I hope you have a copy right next to you. Ta-da!
Uh,
And I think mine's backward, is it?
no, it looks great.
Okay, good. Um, Paul has a lot of experience working with large organizations and has been an executive coach and a consultant in nearly every segment of the economy, which is pretty amazing. And he specializes in the application of positive psychology and leadership in corporate culture. But what impresses me the most about what you do, Paul, is the whole theme is on betting on happiness. And in the workplace culture, um, my goodness, happiness means business, but we're not seeing that so much in today's world. And that's the whole theme of this amazing book, Beyond Profit and Productivity. But the subtitle is Putting Positive Workplace Culture to Work. So let's talk about the inspiration and the growth that you've had from that first book to this book, and how you serve in our wonderful world.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Becky. It's been so fun to be on this journey with you again. It was 2017 when we launched my first book,
That's
and all your
amazing.
great help getting this next book out has been really appreciated. It is such a big task. It's like pregnancy. There's this gestation period getting this book out, and then finally it gets released. So I'm so happy that today's official date has come along. And to your question, uh, I've been fascinated with kind of business improvement methodologies. When I was young, it was reading all the gurus, Stephen Covey and Jim Collins and all that. But when positive psychology became its own specialty within the broader field of psychology, I was so impressed that science, good quality science, laboratory tested, peer reviewed, double-blind studies could show what actually leads to human thriving, human success. And it's not really super surprising that when we're experiencing a lot of positive emotions, we function as an organism better. We're smarter, we're healthier. And the science was really, really strong on that. And that's a lot of what the first book was about. And not surprisingly, as this science has matured, people in the business community have said, how can we demonstrate that these same things that are true for the individual human animal becomes true for human groupings? And there's just a ton now of great science showing how we can apply these same principles of positive psychology in broader workplace settings. And maybe I'll just run on just for a second longer. From an evolutionary perspective, we are a species that survived in groups, in tribal communities. And they were, deep bonds of affection. Mostly they would have been kinship. So mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters and so on, with this incredibly strong mutual set of interests that as a community we survive together. And humans fundamentally still need that in our
We
in our
do.
biology today. And
Yes.
so for a lot of us, one of the most important tribes we'll have in our entire lifetimes are those that we have in our workplaces. And when we take a deliberate intention of directing our business towards meeting those human psychological needs so that we feel that belonging in the workplace and feel positive and share in that mutual interest for success, not only of each other as individuals, but as the group as a whole. Business has become powerful in ways that I think are less appreciated and under attended to by most organizations.
I think that is so, we see it, I think since COVID happened, we've seen people wake up to recognizing that if they're not happy, they're going to move on. It's just, we're not going to do this anymore. And happiness in the workplace, as in everyday life, means productivity. It means creativity. It means so many pieces of this, that you know, the effectiveness, the profitability of the company. If your employees are happy, things are going to be much more profitable, and they're going to be more prone to be innovative in new, fresh ideas and goodness. And you know, I have a daughter who's been in the medical field for a very long time, and she always overperforms, but she was so unhappy that she started putting on weight, and there was so much
Oh,
friction all the time. And she finally made a big switch. She works from home, still in the medical profession, but she didn't have, because she was over so many people, like, you know, in an office position where she was over a lot of people, and people were not happy, and therefore it kind of all landed on her. And so it could have been so different. And we're seeing so many leaders that are starting to recognize it's that great resignation, you know, if the press is calling it. They're recognizing that this is, if we don't have happy people working in the workplace, there's not going to be the productivity, and people will move on.
yeah, you have put your finger right on something that is a phenomena that did not occur in past generations. You know, you and I are probably X gen, and
Right.
millennials and Gen Z are quite different. And there's it's not just that we raised them as different people. And, you know, the parents of my generation, our generation, we made the people that they are today through our values that these young adults now have. But also fundamentally, the economy has changed. If you look way, way back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we took people out of agrarian peasant lifestyles and said you can work very hard and with poor, poor conditions in the factory. But the promise on the part of the employer was that we'll keep your standard of living just barely better than it was when you were on the farm.
Right.
And every subsequent generation was promised just a little bit higher standards of living for all 300 years of the post-industrial revolution. But in 1974, something changed, and it was when real wages, wages adjusted for inflation, froze. And so young people today don't have that same promise that our generation and preceding generations had, which that was basically, I'll do what you say and give you what you want, Mr. Employer, in exchange for a higher standard of living than my parents had. That equation doesn't work anymore. Not only are
No.
kids' wages frozen, but the things that we often equate to a good standard of living, things like our ability to buy good housing, while wages have been frozen, cost of housing has gone
It's
up and up and
like
up and
that.
up.
Yep.
So people are bringing to the employment contract a very different psychology. And that psychology is what you refer to it, and the popular media calls the Great Resignation. And it's this idea that says, I will cross the street for a nickel more per hour if the satisfaction for my soul is better than it was where I am today. And you know, the interesting thing is people our generation too have looked at that and said, yeah, I want that too. I want my employer, my workplace to feed something more in my psyche than just meeting my physical and monetary needs.
Right.
Um, and when organizations attend to this psychological need that we all have, they get something that's called organizational citizenship, which is just an academic term that says we start to volunteer our hearts. Previously, when we were just disgruntled, we stuck within our job description and
Right.
maybe, frankly, only gave a 50% effort even within that task that we were assigned.
Only
But
do
when
what you
I
have to do. Yeah.
yeah, we did what we had to do, and maybe, you know, we searched the internet for hours in addition. But when there's high organizational citizenship, people aren't being paid for their labor. They're volunteering their hearts. They're looking around the organization for ways to solve problems. And they can go way, way outside of that box that is their job description and just say, how do I help? What can I do to further the benefit to the entire organization? And that's what we're really after with this, is to say, how do you get people to no longer just be paid for labor, but to have that kind of emotional quality of
vested
volunteerism.
interest. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
You know what, I was watching 60 Minutes ago, 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, and they interviewed this company, and for right now, I can't remember which one it was, but their employees, when this company bought out the company, they wanted to keep the employees, but they got all those employees on board. The morale was low, everything was awful, and people were not making it. They were moving away out of the city to other places. And this guy that came in, he got everybody in the company totally invested in this company, and they were receiving shares. They were receiving rewards for really putting their heart and soul into the work. And the morale, the productivity, everything was amazing, and people were staying in the community. They were able to get a card and improve their housing conditions and send their kids to college and do things that they really wanted to do but could not, working at the very same place but with a different mindset and a different leadership. So I think this is key and paramount to what you're putting across. Is if you've got really happy people working, and they're rewarded for their innovation, they're rewarded for finding better ways to do things, you're going to keep them. They're going to be happy, and they're going to be bringing other people to that will, be great in the company too, because it's like almost kind of like a vibrational frequency. When people are happy, everything changes.
You're so right. I mean, there's all kinds now of academic evidence proving these points that when the psychological climate of an organization is very positive and buoyant and resilient, well, not only is that kind of just a nice to have, and it's good that humans are happier, but happier humans, as you alluded to earlier, have all kinds of better qualities as an individual. They're smarter, they work harder, they've got better energy, they're healthier, and so on and so on and so on. And collectively, they produce better for their companies. And the research is so clear on this now. Healthcare costs go way down in an organization. Absenteeism goes way down in an organization. Profitability, financial benefit goes up. Innovative actions take place more readily. And even, it's interesting that even when we look into the US Army, which has had hundreds of thousands of soldiers assessed for their levels of personal happiness, the research now shows that those that are the happiest amongst the soldiers win more awards for heroic behavior. They fight harder, they give more wholesomely to their organization. So across this whole range of ways of measuring both the kind of ethical, we want people to be happy and it's just a moral good, business outcomes, and even when it comes to sacrifice we make for God and country,
Right.
all of those things we can demonstrably show get better when the leaders of an organization, in a very deliberate fashion, turn their attention to the emotional dimension of their workplace. And for most organizations, it's just kind of a little bit out of sight. They're busy with processes and marketing and watching their financials. And they know that, and they might even say superficially, we're a people first organization. But are they genuinely planning and executing a strategy to increase the level of positive emotions in their workplace? And by that, we don't mean just happy, we mean
Yeah, it's not rah
proud,
rah rah.
inspired, grateful, peaceful, feeling aligned that their values are shared personally with the values of the organization. It all makes a difference, but it takes intentional forethought on the part of leaders in a business.
Very much. So you have beyond it, one of the chapters is called Beyond Motivation Toward an Energized Workforce. Let's delve into how does a company, when they begin to realize things are not going the way it quite should, and we can transform this, how does it go beyond that motivation to creating a workforce that is wanting to do the thing?
I love the question. Um, there is a reality that the the truest leaders in an organization are less what we think they are. They're not always people in the most vaunted position. The CEO may be less influential than one would think based on their stature, their access to information. Um, the research, primarily led by a guy named Kim Cameron, who's a brilliant positive psychology researcher working in the field of business, Cameron talks a lot about something called positive energizers. And they're the people that we volunteer to go to in an organization because we just want their advice. We like the energy. We might not even be aware of why we seek them out, but we do. And they're not always the most extroverted people. They're just people who have a warmth and acceptance
A
of their
deeper
colleagues coming.
caring. Yeah.
Yeah, they just want to help. And so when we map out in an organization who are the most influential people, the bias we have is they're going to be the people in the C-suite or the people who are the supervisors and team leaders. But the truth is, when we ask people to say, who would you go out amongst your team members or within your organization when you need help or advice? We find it's not the position in the organization, it's the degree of positivity that that person shares.
Absolutely.
So when you
Yeah.
want to go beyond motivation in an organization, what you really want to do is identify those positive energizers, and if you can, create them. And then the organization just has this explosion of very, very good energy towards the outcomes that you want to achieve.
Right. My husband was working in the dairy industry, which is in the milk processing part of it. And endlessly, even though he was more in the managerial position, not so much in the higher levels, people would come to him before they would go to anybody in higher management because he didn't put them down. He worked out a solution. He was well thought of just because he made it more comfortable for them to come to him with questions and ideas and everything else. But he treated them with respect, and that's not always what happens with those that are not out there in the actual on the floor working and making things happen.
Yeah, you're totally right. And let me give you a practical example of it. It doesn't show up in the book because it's so recent, but one of the clients we were working with just last year, and in fact, I'm going to be back in California next week with the same client, is America's largest hauler of produce, a huge, huge trucking company. And they had a lot of great values. And as a family business, people often were really quite committed to the organization. And at the same time, it kind of had a masculine, hard-driven, productivity above all else kind of ethic.
Right.
And people bought in, but they wasn't always happy making. And last year we worked with them to just kind of shift their energy and shift the leadership attention to the emotional dimension of their workplace. And in less than a year, they had an 80% reduction in their claims costs. People are just healthier, doing much better. They're online to save more than $3 million annually just in their insurance costs. And I'm sure there's all kinds of huge productivity benefits that they're getting too. And so this stuff is not just theoretical or nice to have. There are just these very, very practical bottom line implications for businesses that invest in it.
I have a 10-minute speech this afternoon with a large group, and it's on our vibrational frequencies, the rate of vibration. And the first thing that we think about is it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile.
Yeah.
you know, and and the whole premise is it's on happiness is the whole subject matter. But the two premises of the things to do is one is smile more often, or smile more each day and have more fun. When you combine those two, it makes such a difference in how you feel physically, how you're received. If you walk into a store and you're smiling and you're looking people in the eye, there's, like, wow, you're smiling. And what does it do? It brings that smile to that person. And it's contagious, just as, oh, I don't feel good, and how unproductive you become when you constantly say, I don't feel good. But if you lift that, and I know this is kind of just basic, but it's still part of the core of raising of the vibrational levels, even within a company. If they're happy, everything changes.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And the dynamic of happiness, sometimes people can be a bit dismissive. They can think it's, oh, should we be walking around with giant grins on our face and skipping down the hallways as though there's not a problem or care in the world? And of course, we're not talking about that. Happiness is sort of an umbrella term that refers to a whole bunch of other positive
Yes.
emotions. joy, gratitude, serenity, curiosity, pride, inspiration, amusement. Now, all these kinds of things are all positive emotions. And so one of the things when we're coaching leaders is we're not saying you have to show up as this ridiculously, constantly happy person. No, that's not it.
It's not reality.
It's not reality. We're constantly dealing with problems in our personal and our professional lives. But if I could be overly simplistic in describing the ideal emotional um, context for a workplace, it's what we call rational optimism. It says I'm still grounded in reality. I haven't lost my mind and I think everything's going to be great all the time. So I'm very rational, but I lean into this optimistic posture all the time. I'm looking to the strengths of my organization and the hopeful things that I can see based on the rational observations I make, and just present that emotional context to the people I work with. And when that kind of what you're calling vibration is present all the time, it's not at all surprising that it attracts the best out of the people who are around you, clients included, right? Your customers love you more when you're rationally optimistic. So
Right.
it's way more practical and doable to create this emotional context. It's not just wishful thinking. There's kind of processes that people can use and employ strategies to get there.
So cool. You mentioned in your conversation that you do a lot of traveling, that you speak in a number of locations and you go into organizations and really help them to develop what you're talking about, this kind of leadership. So tell me about your process that way. You must go into organizations and work with the leadership to change that, whatever's happening into something else. Give us some examples of some of the work that you do.
Well, one of the most important things is that before you can really help a company, you need to kind of what's called a discovery visit. And it means I interview a lot of people. I might also do some tactical surveying, very short, what I call pulse surveys that don't bog the workforce down with a million questions, but just get a few questions out there. But more important than the surveying is actually talking to lots and lots of people, because you'll find that if there's consistent themes that come across in the organization about where the negativity exists, and also even what they lean into and makes the organization feel most positive, well, we try to then address specifically where the weaknesses are, and also lean into and leverage where they're already doing well from a positive psychology point of view. And once you have the analysis of where the company's actually at in any given moment, then you develop a strategy. And almost always the strategy is going to include a lot of leadership training. And it's mostly emotional intelligence training, which, unlike IQ, which is stuck somewhere around the age of 25, we're not going to get
Right.
any smarter or any dumber. But EQ, emotional intelligence, is mostly made up of learnable skills. Some of us are obviously starting out in life with some natural advantages in this area, but everyone can learn methodologies to be more self-aware, have better self-regulation, become better aware socially of what other people are feeling around us, and then managing that emotional context. And so every organization can benefit from this kind of training. And the thing that's tricky sometimes, and sometimes it comes down to budgetary concerns, the best implementation is at that very front line of leadership,
Mhm.
because often organizations are mistakenly believing that the culture of the organization is owned by the senior executives. They get set the vision and the values, and they proclaim what the culture of the organization will be. But the culture is actually owned by the frontline workers. It's their attitudes, it's their beliefs, it's their perceived sense of history that make that culture. And the only real leverage point that the C-suite has is to invest in their frontline leaders and get them to have that influence on the,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so that's what we mostly try to do in organizations. And gosh, we've worked with so many. I mean, right now, one of our bigger clients is the National Guard here in the United States. And their goal is not only soldier well-being, which is huge, and they've got concerns about suicides and things that are really,
Absolutely. Yes.
really frightening, but also just readiness. How volunteering are there people who are in their workforce? And the degree to which we can get an emotional commitment is very predictive of better soldiering, better outcomes for the organization. And the approach we take working with that client obviously is very different than if we're working with a credit union or a hospital or something like that.
True. Right, right. That's interesting. So how does somebody get a hold of you for, if they've read your book, there's information there, but if somebody's watching this video and said, "Man, this is exactly what I need," how do they get a hold of you?
Probably the best place to go to is our website, which is happinessmeansbusiness.com. And there you'll find all our contact information and the kind of work that we do. And people can email me directly at paul@happinessmeansbusiness.com.
That's amazing, because just the happiness means business means is really pretty cool. What a great name because that describes it. It puts it in a nutshell. This is what it is, and well, we celebrate with you. You've become a #1 international bestseller, and you've just been doing incredibly well with our pre-launch process, and now today the book launch. We celebrate with you, and you have so much to celebrate, and I hope you will take some time today to celebrate, and just really acknowledge the goodness that you're bringing to the world, because I think one of the biggest things that I have, I've worked with many, many authors, and I find that there's so much goodness in people, and those that are wanting to most of us really want to be that force for change in the world. And
Thank you
that's
so much,
what you are doing.
Becky. I just I love what we do. It's my passion, and I want to acknowledge the co-author Jackson Kerchis. And Jackson has spent some of his early life as a practicing Buddhist monk. And of course, one of the most important values that as a monk he has committed himself to is reducing suffering in the world. And so, this is a book about making more money, but it's also a book about reducing suffering in the world. And let's face it, there's a lot of people out there, all of us at times, hurting. And if this book and our work ever makes modest improvements in anyone's lives, we're so grateful for that opportunity. And I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much, Becky, for helping us get this thing out into the real world. It's wonderful to
It's
be
been
here.
my pleasure, and I really appreciate that there's people like you out there doing this kind of work, because that is what's going to transform our world. And I see it every day working with all the different authors. They're all bringing something of their wisdom and their magic to the world just because they care and they want to make a difference. And I think that it's all of us doing that creates that eventually it ripples out to the world, and it's just amazing. So congratulations on an excellent book, and even more congratulations on the work that you do for our world.
Thank you,
All right.
Becky. See you next
Thank you.
time.
Thank you. And so we will conclude this interview, but if you have not yet picked up a copy of Beyond Profit and Productivity, putting positive workplace culture to work culture to work, be sure go to Amazon and pick up a copy. It will soon be in all of the online bookstores, and even more so, if you know somebody that could benefit with this book, buy an extra copy and send it to them, or at least tell them about it. It's a truly amazing read. So thank you, and congratulations again.